Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about a possible matchup between Anthony Joshua and Oleksandr Usyk because that's what the next road for both of these fighters is looking like. It looks like they're probably going to have to face each other. From what I hear, the WBO ordered Anthony Joshua to defend the WBO title against Oleksandr Usyk. I believe that Anthony Joshua, he asked for an extended period of time, probably so he could wait for the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder trilogy winner when it comes down to it. But unfortunately, that does not come to fruition for Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, I believe, will have their trilogy match within the next couple of months. I doubt that it would happen in June, obviously, because that would be way too soon. So, from what I'm hearing, they're probably going to have that fight in July. I'm hearing July 24th is probably the most likely date. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe the fight might even happen in August. Who knows? But when it comes down to it, the next fight for Anthony Joshua is apparently going to have to be against Oleksandr Usyk, at least if he wants to keep his WBO title. And I personally think that Anthony Joshua, I think that he will fight him. I think that he does want to keep his WBO title. Let me also say this when it comes down to it, because a certain amount of people, they might wonder, at least my opinion on this, and say, well, what do you personally think about this matchup? Do you think that this is a great matchup when it comes down to it? Do you think that this is a bad matchup? How much of a chance do you give both fighters in this fight? Yada, 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 yada when it comes down to it. Well, let me just say this when it comes down to it. First of all, if you've actually been around my channel at least for the past few months, I released a video releasing my top 10 pound for pound fighters. I'm not sure how many people actually watched the video or not, but I have both Oleksandr Usyk and Anthony Joshua on my top 10 pound for pound list. I have Oleksandr Usyk higher on my pound for pound list than Anthony Joshua because Oleksandr Usyk, he ended up completely unifying a whole entire division. But Anthony Joshua, one thing I'll say about him is that he has a very great resume for the heavyweight division. He's defeated a lot of the more talented fighters there. There's always this narrative that Anthony Joshua, that he ducks and avoids certain fighters, but I've never seen that with Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua, he fights pretty much everybody when it comes down to it. And I'm not saying that with the Deontay Wilder situation that maybe Anthony Joshua did not realize the threat of a Deontay Wilder. But do I ever believe that Anthony Joshua was 100% avoiding him? No. That's just my personal opinion. In my opinion, actually, I thought maybe it could have been Deontay Wilder that was avoiding an Anthony Joshua because he was the one that did not sign that DAZN deal, but it is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it, all that is water under the bridge for right now. We got to talk about this matchup, and do I think it's a good matchup? I do think it is a good matchup. I'm actually, when it comes to this matchup, I'm actually personally excited. I'm personally excited for this matchup when it comes down to it because Oleksandr Usyk, I think that he certainly is one of the more skilled fighters in the world. Now, there's a certain amount of people that like to compare him to Vasyl Lomachenko and say, oh, he reminds me a lot of Vasyl Lomachenko. I'm not going to necessarily say that he reminds me of Vasyl Lomachenko. I mean, they have some similarities, like they're both southpaw, I believe, and, they both come from the Ukrainian boxing school when it comes down to it. But I don't know if I would say that I see a great amount of similarities there. Oleksandr Usyk, he kind of has his own style that I see. I would say that he's a less skilled, I would say that he certainly is less skilled than a Lomachenko. But you kind of expect that with some of the bigger guys. But when it comes down to it, Oleksandr Usyk certainly is one of the more skilled fighters in the world. When I remember when he first came up on the scene, I actually never was overly impressed with him. But by the time he was facing certain guys like Murat Gassiev in the cruiserweight division and Tony Bellew and a couple of other guys that, I'm drawing a blank to right now. But by the time he was defeating those guys, I was pretty decently impressed with him because he wasn't just beating these guys, he was beating them dominantly. And that was that was still a pretty talented division when it came down to it. That was actually not that bad of a division. I don't think that it was a poor competition division. I'm not going to say that it was, the most talented division in boxing when it came down to it, but I don't think overall that Usyk was just beating bums when it came down to it. I think that he was beating some very decent fighters. So he's been very impressive within the past few years. And of course, Oleksandr Usyk, to prove his greatness even more, he could have just stayed at cruiserweight. He could have just decided to do that. But just like a lot of the other, great cruiserweights before him, he decided to go up to heavyweight. He decided to show off his greatness there. And we've seen him fight 2 heavyweight fights. The first fight was against Chaz Witherspoon. A certain amount of people said that he looked vulnerable in that fight, or that he was having a lot of problems with Chaz Witherspoon. To be honest with you, I think that narrative is very much overrated. I think overall that Chaz Witherspoon, I think that he handled Chaz Witherspoon pretty easily. He ended up stopping him. Chaz Witherspoon, to be honest with you, he he looked in such horrible shape when it came down to it. I'm not even sure how well Chaz Witherspoon trained for that fight. When it came down to it, he looked so out of shape. But when it comes down to it overall, Oleksandr Usyk, he ended up stopping him. And then he had a very tough fight with Derek Chisora, who I've always said was a decently tough fighter when it comes down to it. I certainly would rank him within the top 20 heavyweight fighters of today. He gave Joseph Parker, and I've been somewhat critical of Joseph Parker in the past, but it is what it is. He gave Joseph Parker, who in my opinion is one of the top 10 heavyweights of today, he gave Joseph Parker a very tough fight when it comes down to it. I'd have to rewatch it to see exactly what I would score that fight, but it was a very tough fight throughout the whole entire thing. Derek Chisora, he's no joke, and Oleksandr Usyk, he was able to get past him. I think the judges had that fight about 7 rounds to 5. Personally, I had it a little bit wider than that, but Oleksandr Usyk handled business either way. Now, what I will say is this: Oleksandr Usyk, he did seem a little bit hittable in that fight. It's not like Oleksandr Usyk is completely not hittable when it comes down to it. It's not like he has, the best defense that I've ever seen when it comes down to it, but he does make adjustments. He's not the worst defender in the world. He does have decent defense when it comes down to it. He actually doesn't have that bad of foot speed. He moves it around pretty well. He's a slick fighter. He's a decent fighter. He's a tricky fighter. And Anthony Joshua, even though he probably clearly is going to be the favorite in this fight because he's going to be so much bigger than Oleksandr Usyk and a certain amount of other things, and he's going to be looked at as a greater athlete, which I do think Anthony Joshua is a greater athlete. But when it comes down to it, Oleksandr Usyk, what I will say is this: certainly don't underestimate him in this fight. I am going to favor Anthony Joshua in this fight. I do think that Anthony Joshua deserves to be the favorite in this fight with the amount of dominance that he has shown in the heavyweight division. But this is a very interesting fight, not only because Oleksandr Usyk is such a tricky and smart fighter, but Anthony Joshua, when it comes down to it, he actually tends to have more problems with these types of fighters. He tends to have problems with the smaller fighters that might be able to get him on the inside. And that's why this fight to me is so interesting, because Anthony Joshua, two of the most difficult fights actually in his career, or overall, ones where it looked like he was having trouble. One was against Joseph Parker, and the other couple against Andrew Ruiz. Now, I still thought that he clearly won the Joseph Parker fight. I remember scoring it. I think I scored it 9 rounds to 3. Now, of course, ask the Joseph Parker fans, they'll completely disagree, but it is what it is. Like I said, Joseph Parker, I didn't think that he was overly impressive in that fight. Now, I don't think Anthony Joshua was overly impressive in that fight either, but he was still able to outbox Joseph Parker, because I just don't remember Joseph Parker really doing a whole lot in that fight when it came down to it. But Anthony Joshua, you could tell that his offense, it was somewhat stunted in that fight, because he was a bit afraid of Joseph Parker's speed. He was a bit afraid of what Joseph Parker might be able to do on the inside. And against Andrew Ruiz in the first fight, I remember that the first couple of rounds were very tough. Then the third round, I remember the knockdown happening. And then for those of us that remember that fight, we all know what happened after that. Anthony Joshua, he can have a little bit of a problem with certain fighters like this. So we'll see what happens. Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, I believe that they're the top 3 heavyweights of the world, but they all kind of have different issues. I think Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, they seem to have a little bit more of a problem with fighters that can maybe get on their inside range, and might be able to tee off of them on the inside and be speedy and might be able to counter him on the inside. As we've seen Tyson Fury, he actually had some problems with Otto Wallin. He had a lot of problems with Otto Wallin. He had some problems with Steve Cunningham many years before. Also had a lot of trouble with this one fighter, at least in the first fight. I believe his name was like John McDermott? I can't remember what his name was. Some pudgy guy when it came down to it. But gave Tyson Fury a decent first fight. A lot of people actually thought that John won that first fight against Tyson Fury many years ago. So Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, they actually have very similar problems when I take a look at, that dilemma. And Deontay Wilder, for example, he actually seems to have problems with fighters. And he's kind of the opposite. He seems to have problems with fighters that are of his own same physical dimensions. So if you have a similar reach to Deontay Wilder, or if you have a similar height and reach to Deontay Wilder, like I said, similar physical dimensions, he's going to have a little bit more problems with you. You can go ahead and check out his fights against Gerald Washington, also against Tyson Fury, and also against Luis Ortiz. He has problems against all those fighters, partially because Tyson Fury and Luis Ortiz are decently skilled boxers, but on top of that, they have very long reaches, and Tyson Fury is decently tall. So it's just, a certain amount harder to hit him, for Deontay Wilder at least. So what I'm going to say is this. For this fight, I think it's very interesting. I am going to favor Anthony Joshua in this fight. Would it surprise me if Anthony Joshua knocked out Oleksandr Usyk? Of course not. Anthony Joshua has one-shot knockout power in both hands when it comes down to it. But after the way Anthony Joshua lost to Andrew Ruiz those couple of years ago, and with some of the troubles that I have seen him have against certain fighters that can be smaller in stature, and that he's afraid of them maybe getting him on the inside, I think that it's very possible this might go to decision. Don't underestimate Oleksandr Usyk in this fight, is what I'm going to say. Don't underestimate him. I think Anthony Joshua does deserve to be the favorite when it comes down to it. I do think that Anthony Joshua is going to be the clear favorite in this fight. I think he's going to be the huge favorite by most betting odds, but don't underestimate Don't underestimate Oleksandr Usyk in this fight. Oleksandr Usyk is a real live dog in this fight, in my opinion. Now, I remember watching a video by the Hat Man Strikes Back. That's a boxing channel that I tend to watch, that I actually enjoy watching, because he at least comes across to me as more logical and more objective than most of these other mainstream boxing channels that I tend to watch. So it is what it is. But I remember him talking about it, and he was also saying the same thing. Don't underestimate Oleksandr Usyk. And he was bringing up parts of history. He was actually bringing up the Evander Holyfield story. And what he was saying with Evander Holyfield is that many people thought Mike Tyson was going to destroy him. Many people thought Evander Holyfield was going to get destroyed by all these heavyweights because he was smaller in stature usually than them, and he was coming up from cruiserweight. And Evander Holyfield, he was taking certain people the distance, when he should have been knocking them out. And it's the same thing with Oleksandr Usyk a little bit. Oleksandr Usyk, when we take a look at it, he doesn't look like an A-grade athlete compared to an Anthony Joshua or a Deontay Wilder. He maybe doesn't even appear to be the athlete that Tyson Fury is for the heavyweight division when it comes down to it. So many people may be looking at him and saying, well, he doesn't necessarily have a great power. He doesn't necessarily have a great speed. He doesn't even appear to have always a great movement when it comes down to it. So what are his chances against an Anthony Joshua? Well, in this point, I will point to a certain channel that made a very good video about this, actually. The Hat Man Strikes Back. Like I said, he made a very good point. He made a very good video. He said, don't repeat history. Because for those of you that are underestimating Oleksandr Usyk in this fight, you also would have been the ones that underestimated Evander Holyfield in both Mike Tyson fights. And we all know what Evander Holyfield ended up doing to Mike Tyson. Once again, now, is that always, the same thing? In some situations, that kind of looks like a very, very, one-dimensional way to look at things, but or fight math way to look at things. And I don't want to always take a look at it that way, but I do think that actually that is the proper way to look at things here. I don't think it's looking at it in a one-dimensional way, but some people might take a look at it that way. I think that is actually the proper way to look at things here. I don't think it's always a good thing to do those type of comparisons. But in this case, it is just saying don't repeat history. At least don't count out Oleksandr Usyk to a great degree. Because Oleksandr Usyk, I do think he at least is a decent athlete. I think that he's a decent boxer. He could give Anthony Joshua a lot of problems. Anthony still does have some holes in his game, even though I do think he has improved as a boxer. If Anthony is able to completely shut out Oleksandr Usyk, if he is able to completely demolish him and knocks him out, without any question, that would be a very impressive performance in my book, and that'd be for sure an A-class fighter that he would have on his resume. And Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, would deserve a hell of a lot of credit. So that's my opinion on this situation. I think that this actually is a very decent matchup. I would personally be very excited to see this. Of course, I think Anthony Joshua would be the incoming favorite when it comes down to it, but it's still a great fight in my opinion. I would love to see Oleksandr Usyk against any of those fighters, to be honest with you. But Anthony Joshua, because he did get knocked out against Andrew Ruiz a couple of years ago, I feel that it's probably going to actually intrigue more people since this fight is against Anthony Joshua than it would maybe if it were a Tyson Fury or a Deontay Wilder. Or who knows? Maybe a certain amount of more people, maybe they would like to see Usyk against those fighters as well. I don't know. But to be honest with you, I think Usyk, especially against an Anthony Joshua or a Deontay Wilder, I think that, I don't think that he would be the favorite going in. But those fights would be interesting when it comes down to it. And even against the Tyson Fury, it would be interesting, But Tyson Fury, the reason why I say Tyson Fury might be slightly more favored against Oleksandr Usyk than those other two is because Tyson Fury, he has a great skill set for a heavyweight, and on top of that, he just weighs a lot. like he weighs like 270 pounds. So that's gonna be very hard for Usyk to get past. It is what it is. But when it comes down to the overall, that's pretty much my breakdown of this. When it comes down to it so far, I actually hope this matchup ends up happening. I hope it gets announced soon. Let me know what you guys think on this, and I'll talk to y'all later.